What happens when London's coldest billionaire CEO meets a warm-hearted cafe girl with nothing to lose? Welcome back, beautiful people. This story is where drama meets devotion, and where one glance can rewrite destiny. Asterisk, the coffee cup shattered against the marble floor of Julian Ashford's penthouse office, sending fragments skittering across the pristine surface like fallen stars. Steam rose from the dark puddle, the only warmth in a room that felt colder than the London blizzard raging. 30 floors below. 1 month, as the chairman's words echoed in Julian's mind as he stared at the broken porcelain. Marry within 1 month, or we replace you. The scandal had been brewing for weeks. Leaked documents suggesting evergreen biotech's revolutionary tissue regeneration drug caused dangerous mutations. Lies, all of it. But the media had already convicted him in the court of public opinion. Stock prices plummeted. Investors fled. The board demanded a scapegoat, and Julian's unmarried status made him the perfect target. He pressed his palm against the floor-to-ceiling window, watching snow blanket the city in deceptive purity.
Ow.
Below, people scurried through the streets. Like ants, their lives small and inconsequential. Yet somewhere in that maze of humanity was his solution. A woman desperate enough to accept his offer, naive enough not to question it. The elevator chimed. His assistant's heels clicked against marble as she approached with careful steps, avoiding the broken cup. "Sir, the background checks you requested." Julian didn't turn from the window. "Tell me." "Clara Brennan, 25, orphaned at 8. Works at the Hearth Cafe near your headquarters. No family. Minimal savings, but she's been saving every penny for 3 years to fund a children's charity. Perfect. Desperate and idealistic. Easy to manipulate. Criminal record. Clean, though there's something else." His assistant hesitated. She was adopted briefly at age 12 by the Morrison family. They returned her to the orphanage after 6 months. No official reason given. Julian's reflection in the window remained impassive, but something cold twisted in his chest. He knew the Morrison name, his father's business partners. The same people who'd attended the party his father had abandoned him for 22 years ago. Address: she lives in a studio apartment above the cafe. "Sir, are you certain about this approach? Your reputation, my reputation, is already in ruins." Julian turned, his gray eyes sharp as winter steel. "This is damage control." 30 minutes later, he stood outside the hearth, watching through frost-etched windows as Clara moved behind the counter. She was smaller than her photos suggested, blonde hair escaping a messy bun as she hummed while cleaning. When she dropped a spoon and laughed at herself, something unfamiliar stirred in Julian's chest. Weakness. He crushed it immediately. The bell chimed as he entered, bringing a gust of Arctic air that made the fire flicker. Clara looked up, and Julian felt the full force of her green eyes. They were bright with life, unmarked by the cynicism that had carved itself into his soul. "Evening. Terrible weather, isn't it?" she smiled. The expression so genuine it felt like a physical blow. "What can I get you?" "Coffee. Black." Julian's voice carried its usual ice, but she didn't flinch. "Coming right up. You look like you've had a rough day." She moved with unconscious grace despite her clumsiness, humming under her breath as she prepared his order. Julian studied her, cataloging weaknesses. The worn sweater that had been mended multiple times. The shoes with thin soles that would never survive a proper London winter. The way she treated the cafe like a home instead of just a workplace. "Here you go." Clara set the cup down, steam curling between them. "On the house. You look like you need it more than I need the money." Julian's hand stilled on the cup. When had anyone last shown him kindness without expecting something in return? The coffee was perfect, rich and warming, made with a care he hadn't tasted in years. "You're bleeding money with that attitude." Clara laughed, the sound brightened. "The dim cafe, maybe? But money isn't everything, is it? Sometimes people just need to know someone cares." The words hit harder than Julian expected. He watched her move to serve another customer. Witnessed the genuine warmth she offered to everyone who entered her small sanctuary. This woman, who had nothing, gave freely of herself, while he, who had everything, hoarded even his kindness. An idea crystallized, cold and calculating. Julian waited until the last customer left before approaching the counter. Clara was counting the day's modest earnings, her brow furrowed as she worked the numbers. "Not enough, is it?" he said quietly. She startled, dropping several coins that rolled across the worn wood. "Oh, I thought you'd left. A charity you're saving for. Children in need." Julian moved closer, noting how she tensed despite her friendly demeanor. Good. She had survival instincts. "How much do you need? I'm sorry, your orphanage fund? How much?" Clara's eyes narrowed slightly. "How do you know about that?" "I make it my business to know things." Julian pulled out his phone, showing her the bank transfer screen. £500,000, enough to build your dream and fund it for years. Her breath caught. The coins in her hand trembled. "What's the catch?" "Smart girl. Marry me." The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Clara stared at him, as if he'd spoken in a foreign language, her green eyes wide with disbelief. "I'm sorry, what?" "A business arrangement. 1 year of marriage, public appearances, playing the devoted wife. In exchange, you get your funding, and I get my reputation back. You're insane." But she didn't say no immediately, and Julian caught the flicker of desperate hope that crossed her features. "I'm practical. You need money. I need a wife." Temporarily, Clara set down the coins with deliberate care. "And after the year, clean divorce. You disappear with your money, I return to my life. Simple. Nothing about you seems simple." Studied his face, searching for something he'd buried long ago. "Why me?" "Because you're perfect. No connections, no agenda, no threat to my empire." The words came out harsher than intended, and Julian watched her flinch. "Good. Better she'll understand the truth now, I see." Clara's voice had cooled, but fire still burned in her eyes. "So I'm nobody special. Just convenient." "Exactly." Was silent for a long moment, staring at the transfer screen. Julian could practically see her mental calculations, weighing pride against desperation. He knew which would win. Oh, it always did. "The children would be housed within 6 months, she said quietly. "Guaranteed. And you'd never interfere with the charity's operations? I have no interest in orphans." Something shifted in her expression at those words, a wall slamming down behind her eyes. Julian filed the reaction away for later analysis. "I need time to think." "You have until tomorrow." Morning. The offer expires with the business day. Julian turned to leave, then paused at the door. Snow continued to fall beyond the glass, transforming London into a crystalline wasteland. "One more thing, Miss Brennan. Don't mistake this for kindness. I don't save people. I use them." Stepped into the storm, leaving Clara alone with the weight of his offer and the echo of his warning. Behind him, through the frost-covered window, he watched her sink into a chair and buried her face in her hands. Julian smiled coldly as he walked away. By morning, she'd be his. After all, everyone had a price. He'd just found hers. Clara's hands shook as she unlocked the apartment above the hearth at 2 a.m. Sleep had abandoned her hours ago, leaving her to pace the cafe until exhaustion finally drove her upstairs to her tiny studio. The space felt even smaller. Tonight, walls pressing in like the weight of Julian's impossible offer. £500,000. The number blazed in her mind like a neon sign. Enough to house 50 children, maybe more. It's enough to give them what she'd never had. A real home, stability. Someone who wouldn't send them back when they became inconvenient. Her phone buzzed. Text from Sarah at the orphanage where Clara volunteered weekends. "Emergency. Tommy's foster placement fell through. He's asking for you. Can you come in early tomorrow?" Clara's heart clenched. Tommy was 8, the same age she'd been when her world imploded. Dark hair that stuck up at odd angles, serious brown eyes that had seen too much. Last week, he'd whispered that he was scared no one would ever want to keep him. She typed back quickly, "Of course, I'll be there at sunrise." The phone screen dimmed, reflecting her hollow expression. In the darkness, she could still see Julian Ashford's cold gray eyes. Hear his clinical dissection of why she was perfect for his scheme. Nobody special, just convenient. The words shouldn't have stung so much. She'd heard variations her entire life. From caseworkers who saw her as a file number to potential families who'd ultimately decided she wasn't worth the trouble. But something about Julian's brutal honesty had cut deeper than usual. Maybe because for one brief moment, when he'd first walked into her cafe, she'd felt something electric pass between them, recognition, as if her soul had glimpsed another wounded creature hiding behind expensive armor. Ridiculous. Men like Julian Ashford didn't see women like her except as tools to be used and discarded. Clara pulled out her laptop, the ancient machine wheezing to life. She'd done her research the moment he left, scouring the internet for information about evergreen biotech CEO. What she'd found painted a picture of ruthless brilliance, wrapped in ice. Julian had built his empire from nothing after his father's suicide when Julian was 18. No family, no close friends, just an unbroken string of business victories and broken relationships. The press called him untouchable. Tabloids speculated about his cold heart and colder bed. But Clara had seen something else tonight, a flicker of pain when she'd mentioned caring, tension around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and burdens too heavy to share. She recognized the signs because she wore them herself. Her phone rang, jarring her from dark thoughts. The caller ID made her stomach drop. Mrs. Morrison. Clara, dear. The voice was warm honey over broken glass. I hope I'm not calling too late. I heard through mutual friends that you're considering a rather dramatic career change. Clara's blood turned to ice water. I don't know what you mean. Oh, don't play coy. London's business community is quite small. Julian Ashford's interest in a certain cafe owner is already making waves. How did she know? Clara hadn't told anyone about Julian's proposal. Thought you might benefit from some perspective, Mrs. Morrison continued. After all, we have history, don't we? You and I, 13 years. It's 13 years since the Morrisons had taken Clara into their pristine home, dressed her in designer clothes, paraded her at charity events as their rescued orphan. 6 months of feeling like she'd finally found her place in the world, until she'd overheard Mrs. Morrison on the phone, laughing about their little charity project and how the tax benefits were better than expected. Clara had been returned to the orphanage the next day with no explanation, her belongings stuffed into garbage bags. What do you want? Clara's voice came out steadier than she felt. To give you some friendly advice. Men like Julian collect beautiful, broken things, but they don't keep them. Trust me, dear. I know his type intimately. Because you're married to one? Mrs. Morrison's laugh was sharp as winter wind. Cause. I taught Julian everything he knows about using people's desperation against them. Did you really think your meeting tonight was coincidence? That he just happened to wander into your cafe? The room spun around Clara. What are you talking about? Julian's father and my husband were business partners before the elder Ashford took his own life. Of course, such a messy affair. But Julian learned valuable lessons from that tragedy about the importance of controlling every variable. Clara sank onto her narrow bed, pieces of a puzzle clicking into place with sickening clarity. He's been watching you for weeks, Clara, studying you like a laboratory specimen. Your routines, your vulnerabilities, your pathetic little dreams of saving children. He knows exactly which buttons to push. You're lying. Am I? Ask yourself this, dear. How did he know about your charity fund? You've never told anyone the exact amount you're saving, have you? Clara's silence was answer enough. Had you investigated, background checked, probably has photos of you coming and going from that dreary little cafe. You're not a person to him, Clara. You're a solution to a problem. The phone felt like lead in Clara's trembling hand. Every interaction with Julian replayed in her mind with new, horrible context. His perfect coffee order, his knowledge of her savings, the way he'd appeared exactly when her defenses were lowest. Why are you telling me this? Because I don't like being used any more than you do. Julian's using our shared history with you as a leverage, proof that you're perfectly disposable. It's quite clever, really. Your abandonment issues make you easy to manipulate. Clara closed her eyes against the truth burning through her chest. But here's what Julian doesn't know. Mrs. Morrison's voice turned silky with malice. I kept tabs on you after we sent you back. Such potential, wasted in that squalid orphanage. I've been waiting for the right moment to collect on my investment. What investment? You have something I need, Clara? Access to Julian's world, his computers, his private files. There are certain documents from the old business partnership that need to disappear before they cause problems for my family. Clara's head reeled. You want me to spy on him? I want you to survive him. Take his money, play his game. But remember who warned you. When he inevitably discards you, come to me. I'll make sure you land on your feet. And if I refuse, then you'll destroy yourself chasing after a man who sees you as nothing more than a convenient prop. But that's your choice to make. The line went dead, leaving Clara alone with the wreckage of her naive hopes. She stared at her reflection in the dark window. Seeing the same lost child who'd believed in fairy tale endings until reality had beaten them out of her, Julian Ashford had played her perfectly. Every smile, every moment of imagined connection had been calculated manipulation. He'd researched her like a stock investment, identified her weaknesses, and moved in for the kill when she was most vulnerable. The rational part of her mind screamed to run, to disappear into London's maze of anonymity before she became another casualty of his ambition. But Tommy's face floated in her memory, along with dozens of other children who needed what Julian's money could provide. Clara stood on shaking legs and moved to her dresser, pulling out the business card Julian had left behind. His private number was embossed in silver on black cardstock, expensive as everything else in his world. She dialed before she could lose her nerve. I accept. Her voice cracked on the words. A long pause. Clara, your offer. I accept your terms. It's 3 a.m. I couldn't sleep. She forced steel into her voice. When do we begin this charade? Another pause, and she imagined Julian sitting in his pristine penthouse, calculating the variables of her late-night call. Tomorrow evening, my driver will collect you at 6. We'll need to discuss the parameters of our arrangement in detail. Fine, Clara. His voice softened almost imperceptibly. You understand what you're agreeing to? This isn't a fairy tale. Despite everything, his warning sent an unwelcome flutter through her chest. She crushed it ruthlessly. I understand perfectly, Mr. Ashford. This is business. Nothing more. She hung up before he could respond, then sank back onto her bed and stared at the ceiling until dawn painted the sky gray. By morning, Clara had made her choice. She would take Julian's money and give those children the home she'd never had, but she wouldn't be the naive little orphan girl he'd researched and dismissed. If Julian Ashford wanted to play games with broken people, he was about to learn that some of them had very sharp edges. Julian's penthouse felt like stepping inside a glacier. Clara stood in the center of the vast living room, her worn coat draped over her arm, trying not to gawk at the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a god's-eye view of London. Here screamed wealth and isolation, pristine white furniture that looked untouched, abstract art that probably cost more than most people earned in a decade, and not a single personal photograph in sight. Champagne? Julian emerged from what she assumed was the kitchen, though she couldn't imagine him cooking anything more complex than ice water. I don't drink when conducting business. His eyebrow arched at her formal tone, but he set the bottle aside without comment. Night he traded his business suit for dark jeans and a gray sweater that made his eyes look like storm clouds. More approachable, but no less dangerous. You've changed your mind. It wasn't a question. Clara straightened her spine. About the arrangement? No. About believing your motivations are purely professional? Absolutely. Julian's expression didn't shift, but she caught the slight tightening around his eyes. Meaning I know you've been watching me for weeks. That you had me investigated, analyzed, and selected like a commodity. Clara moved to the windows, needing distance from his penetrating stare. I know our meeting wasn't chance, and I know exactly why you chose me, do you? His calm acceptance made her angrier than denials would have. Because I'm nobody. It's no connections, no power, no ability to threaten your precious empire. The perfect, disposable wife. And yet you're still here. Clara turned to face him, and the rawness in her own voice surprised her. Because those children matter more than my pride. Something flickered across Julian's features. Surprise? Regret? It vanished too quickly to interpret. I see you've done your homework. Mrs. Morrison was very enlightening. Clara watched his face carefully, caught the flash of genuine shock before his mask reasserted itself. Evelyn called you? Warned me, actually, about your history together, about how you learned to manipulate people from the best. Clara stepped. Closer, close enough to see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes. She wants me to spy on you. Julian went perfectly still. And I told you I don't drink when conducting business. I also don't spy for vindictive socialites with their own agendas. Clara reached into her purse and withdrew a folded contract. I had a lawyer draw this up today, my terms. Julian accepted the papers, his fingers brushing hers briefly. Even that slight contact sent an unwelcome jolt of electricity up her arm. You've been busy. I'm not the helpless little orphan girl you've researched, Julian. Survive the system. By learning to think 3 moves ahead, Clara watched him scan the contract, noting his frown deepening with each clause. Problem? You're demanding separate bedrooms, minimal physical contact, and the right to maintain your own schedule and friendships. Julian looked up, his expression unreadable. This hardly looks like a devoted marriage, because it's not a marriage. It's a business transaction with specific deliverables. I'll play the loving wife in public, attend your events, smile for the cameras. But in private, we're strangers sharing the same address. And if the press discovers we're living like roommates, then you'll have to be a better actor. Clara moved to his bookshelf, running her fingers along leather spines that looked untouched. Tell me, do you actually read any of these, or are they just props? Both. Julian set the contract aside and approached her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and cold like winter pine. You're angry. I'm practical, just like you taught me to be. Clara. Her name sounded different in his voice, less clinical than before. What Evelyn told you about our history, that your father and her husband were partners, you learned. Manipulation from watching her destroy people for sport. Clara turned to face him, surprised by the pain she glimpsed behind his careful control. Which part was supposed to shock me, Julian? That you're as damaged as I am? Or that you turned your damage into a weapon? The silence stretched between them like a live wire. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? Clara stepped closer, drawn by something broken in his voice, despite every rational warning. Your father killed himself rather than face whatever scandal Evelyn's husband dragged him into. You were 18, alone? And you built this empire from nothing because you were terrified of ever being that powerless again. Julian's jaw tightened. Spare me the amateur psychology. It's not psychology. It's recognition. Clara's voice softened. Despite herself, you think I don't understand what it's like to have everyone you're supposed to trust abandon you? To learn that love is just another word for temporary convenience? This conversation is pointless, is it? Because from where I'm standing, we're both using each other to avoid facing the real problem. Clara reached out instinctively, her fingers grazing the tension in his forearm. We're terrified of actually connecting with someone because everyone who's supposed to love us has proven that connection is just another form of vulnerability. Julian stared at her hand on his arm, his breathing shallow. You should go. Why? Because I'm seeing too much. Clara didn't move away, drawn by the crack in his armor, despite every self-preservation instinct screaming at her to run. For the first time since you researched me like a stock option, I'm looking back, because this isn't what either of us signed up for. His voice was rough with something that might have been desire or desperation, and Clara felt an answering heat bloom in her chest. This was dangerous territory, emotions that could shatter the careful walls she'd built around her heart. But Julian's vulnerability called to something deeper than logic. The same wounded recognition she'd felt the first night in her cafe. Her hand moved from his arm to cup his face, thumb tracing the sharp line of his cheekbone. Maybe that's exactly what we need. Julian caught her wrist, his grip gentle, but firm. Clara, don't what? Don't feel something real for the first time in years. Don't acknowledge that we're both so starved for genuine connection that we're about to destroy ourselves just to avoid risking it. Don't make this about more than it is. But even as he said it, Julian's thumb was stroking across her pulse point, his gray eyes dark with want and fear in equal measure. Clara felt her carefully constructed defenses crumbling like sand. The words hung between them like a confession. Julian's face was a mask of conflict, desire warring with the control that had kept him safe for so long. Clara could practically see him, calculating risks, analyzing variables, trying to categorize her into something manageable. Then his phone rang. Julian stepped back as if she'd burned him, the spell broken by the shrill electronic intrusion. He glanced at the caller ID, and his entire demeanor shifted, ice reasserting itself over the momentary heat. I have to take this. Clara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold in the vast space. She watched Julian's face as he answered, noted how his expression grew progressively more grim. When? A pause. How many reporters? Another pause? This one longer? I see. Yes, I'll handle it. He hung up and turned back to Clara, his mask fully restored. We have a problem. Someone leaked news of our engagement to the press. They're camped outside your cafe and demanding comments? Clara's stomach dropped. How is that possible? We haven't even signed the contract yet. Evelyn. Julian's voice was flat with certainty. She's forcing our hand, making sure we can't back out without, creating an even bigger scandal. The implications hit Clara like a physical blow. Her quiet life was over, shattered by forces beyond her control. There would be no time to prepare, no gradual adjustment to his world. She was about to be thrust into the spotlight as Julian Ashford's mysterious fiancé, every detail of her past, scrutinized and dissected. I need to go home. You can't. The press will tear you apart. Julian was already moving toward his phone, calling my security team. You'll stay here until we can control the narrative. Not staying here. Panic crept into Clara's voice. I need my things. I need to close the cafe properly. My people will handle everything. Right now, the priority is damage control. His clinical efficiency made Clara's chest tighten with claustrophobia. This was exactly what Mrs. Morrison had warned her about. Julian treating her like a problem to be managed rather than a person with her own agency. Stop. Clara's voice cracked with strain. Just stop planning my life for 5 minutes and let me think. Julian paused, his phone halfway to his ear. For a moment she thought she glimpsed the man who'd touched her face so gently minutes earlier. Then his expression hardened. There's nothing to think about. We're past the point of choice. Now, the engagement is public, which means we're committed whether we like it or not. Clara stared at him, seeing her future crystallizing into a shape she'd never agreed to. Trapped in his pristine tower, cut off from everything that made her who, she was playing a role that would slowly hollow her out from the inside. Then God help us both. Julian's phone buzzed with an incoming text. He glanced at it and his face went ashen. What now? The Morrison family just released a statement to the press. Julian's voice was deadly quiet. They're claiming you lived with them as their ward, and that I'm taking advantage of a vulnerable young woman with a history of abandonment issues. The words hit Clara like a sledgehammer. Her most private wounds, her deepest shames, were about to become tabloid headlines. Mrs. Morrison hadn't just warned her about Julian's manipulation. She'd engineered a trap that would destroy Clara's credibility and force Julian into a position where protecting his reputation meant protecting her. She played us both. Clara's voice was hollow with realization. Yes, and now we're going to play her back. Julian pocketed his phone, his expression glacial with resolve. Get comfortable, Clara. We're about to give London the love story of the century. Clara looked around the cold perfection of Julian's penthouse prison and wondered if this was how her mother had felt in the moments before she'd abandoned 8-year-old Clara at the orphanage. Like she'd made a choice that couldn't be undone, no matter how much it might destroy them both. 3 weeks. Clara had been living in Julian's penthouse for 3 weeks, and the carefully orchestrated charade was slowly killing her from the inside out. She stood at the bathroom mirror, applying makeup with practiced precision while Julian's reflection moved behind her in the bedroom, adjusting his tie with military efficiency. They'd perfected this morning routine, 2 strangers sharing space with the choreographed politeness of experienced dancers who never quite touched. The charity gala tonight, Julian said without looking at her. Remember, we're madly in love. You're the one good thing that's ever happened to me. And you're my Prince Charming, who rescued me from poverty. Clara's voice held no inflection. I know the script. She watched his jaw tighten in the mirror. These past weeks had been a masterclass in controlled intimacy. Public appearances where Julian's arm around her waist sent electric shocks through her nervous system. Press interviews where his tender smile made her forget for dangerous moments that none of it was real. Private dinners where they sat across from each other in silence, the weight of unspoken truths heavy as smoke. The worst part was how good Julian had become at playing the devoted fiancés. He'd memorized her coffee preferences, brought her books. He thought she'd enjoy, ensured her favorite flowers appeared in the penthouse daily. Small kindnesses that felt genuine, even when her rational mind knew they were performance. Clara. Golan's voice stopped her at the bedroom door. About last night? We don't talk about last night. But the memory burned between them anyway. Clara had woken from a nightmare about the orphanage, crying out for her mother in her sleep. Julian had found her on the living room floor, sobbing and disoriented, and had held her until the shaking stopped. For 20 minutes, his arms had been her sanctuary. His heart beat steady against her ear while he whispered reassurances in a voice she'd never heard him use before. When she'd finally looked up at him, his gray eyes had been soft with something that looked dangerously like genuine care. The kiss had been inevitable, desperate, both of them reaching for connection in the dark. It had lasted 30 seconds before Julian pulled away, muttering apologies and retreating to his room like he'd committed a crime. They hadn't spoken about it since. The board meeting is this afternoon, Julian said now, his tone carefully neutral. If all goes well, the marriage timeline might be accelerated. Clara's chest tightened. Meaning they want to see a wedding within 2 weeks. The sooner. We're legally bound. The sooner the scandal dies and stock prices recover. 2 weeks. Clara gripped the doorframe, fighting a wave of claustrophobia. And after? Once your reputation is restored? We honor the original contract. 1 year, then divorce. The clinical certainty in his voice made something inside Clara crack. She'd been so careful these past weeks, building walls around her heart to survive the intimacy of their fake relationship. But Julian's small kindnesses, the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, the broken vulnerability she'd glimpsed in unguarded moments, it was all wearing down her defenses. She was falling in love with her captor. Stockholm Syndrome. With expensive dinners and designer dresses, I need air. Clara grabbed her coat and headed for the elevator. Where are you going? Out. Unless that's not allowed in our arrangement. Julian's reflection watched her leave, its expression unreadable. Clara walked the London streets for hours, trying to outrun the tangle of feelings choking her chest. She ended up at the old orphanage where she'd volunteered, needing to remember who she'd been before Julian's world swallowed her whole. Clara. Tommy launched himself at her with 8-year-old enthusiasm, his arms wrapping around her waist. You came back. Sarah said you were too busy being famous now. Never too busy for you. Clara knelt to his level, drinking in his gap-toothed. Smile, how are things? Okay, better now that you're here. Tommy's expression grew serious. Are you really marrying that man from TV? The one who looks scary? Clara's throat tightened. It's complicated, sweetheart. My mom used to say that when she was lying. Tommy studied her face with unchildlike wisdom. Do you love him? The simple question hit like a physical blow. Clara opened her mouth to give him the party line, then found herself unable to lie to this child who'd already been disappointed by too many adults. I don't know. Then why are you marrying him? Because sometimes we have to do things we don't want to do to help other people. Clara smoothed his unruly hair. The money from this marriage will help build a better place for kids like you. A real home. Tommy considered this with 8-year-old solemnity. Will you still visit us? Always, I promise. But even as she said it, Clara wondered if it was true. Julian's world was consuming her piece by piece, each public appearance stripping away another layer of her authentic self. How long before there was nothing left of the woman who'd sat on this orphanage floor reading stories to unwanted children? Her phone buzzed. A text from Julian. Where are you? We need to talk. Clara's stomach dropped. His tone, even in text, carried an urgency that made her skin prickle with foreboding. On my way back, the elevator ride to Julian's penthouse felt endless. Clara found him standing at the windows, his posture rigid with tension. He didn't turn. When she entered, the board approved the accelerated timeline. Julian's voice was flat, emotionless. We're to be married in 10 days. Clara set down her purse with deliberate care. It's what we expected. There's more. Julian finally turned, and Clara's breath caught at the devastation in his eyes. Evelyn Morrison played her final card today. She leaked the real story about the drug trials to the press. What real story? That the tissue regeneration drug works perfectly. That the leaked documents claiming dangerous side effects were fabricated. Julian's laugh was bitter as winter wind. She's been orchestrating the entire scandal to destroy evergreen biotech, so her husband's pharmaceutical company could acquire our research at fire sale prices. Clara stared at him, pieces clicking into horrible clarity. She used our engagement as a distraction while she positioned herself to steal everything I've built. Yes. Julian moved to his desk, pulling out a tablet and setting it before her. But that's not the worst part. Read the article. Clara's hands trembled as she scanned the breaking news story. The headline made her stomach lurch. Biotech scandal exposed. Morrison Industries orchestrates corporate sabotage through elaborate marriage hoax. The article detailed everything. Julian's investigation into Clara's background, the calculated nature of their first meeting, Mrs. Morrison's manipulation of them both. But the final paragraphs made Clara's world tilt sideways. Sources close to the investigation reveal that Miss Brennan was initially recruited by Mrs. Morrison to gather intelligence on Ashford's private business dealings. The elaborate marriage arrangement appears to have been a cover for corporate espionage, with both parties potentially complicit in the fraud. Clara looked up to find Julian watching her with eyes like glass. They think I'm a spy. The evidence is compelling. Your connection to the Morrisons, your sudden acceptance of my proposal, your insistence on maintaining separate lives. Leon's voice was deadly quiet. Even I'm not sure anymore what's real and what's performance. The words hit Clara like physical blows. You think I've been working with her this entire time? I don't know what to think. Julian raked his hands through his hair, the composed mask finally slipping. 3 weeks ago, I thought I had everything calculated. Now my company is worthless. My reputation is destroyed. And I'm about to marry a woman who might be playing the longest con in history. Julian, are you? The question exploded from him with raw desperation. Because I need to know, Clara. Before this goes any further, I need to know if any of it was real. Clara stared at him, seeing the man behind the ice for the first time. This wasn't the calculating CEO who'd researched her like a commodity. This was someone as broken and afraid as she was, someone who'd risked everything on a gamble that had blown up in spectacular fashion. The night you held me after my nightmare, she said quietly. What? When you kissed me. Was that real? What? Julian's face crumpled slightly. Clara, answer me. Because I've been going insane these past weeks, trying to figure out what's performance and what's genuine. I've been falling in love with you despite every rational instinct telling me to run. And I need to know if I'm the only one drowning here. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. It was real, Julian whispered finally. All of it. Every moment I've wanted to touch you. Every time I've had to stop myself from making this more than it was supposed to be. I've been fighting it for weeks because I knew this would happen. I knew it would all fall apart. Relief and terror flooded Clara in equal measure. Then we figure this out together. There's nothing to figure out. Julian turned back to the windows, shoulders rigid with defeat. Evelyn wins. She gets the company, we get destroyed in the press, and those children you wanted to help will never see a penny of that money. So we fight back. With what? The evidence against us is overwhelming. By tomorrow, every major news outlet will be running stories about our fake engagement and your supposed espionage. My shareholders will demand my resignation, and you'll be lucky to avoid criminal charges? Clara stared at his rigid back, seeing the boy who'd been abandoned in a blizzard 22 years ago. He'd built walls of ice around his heart to survive, and now those same walls were trapping him in a prison of his own making. What if there was another way? There isn't. What if we gave them a different story? Clara moved closer, her mind racing. What if instead of a fake engagement designed to fool the public, we gave them a real marriage designed to save everything you've built? Julian turned slowly, his eyes sharp, despite the defeat written across his features.
Oh, what are you
talking about? Marry me? Not for the board or the press or to salvage your reputation. Marry me because we're both tired of being alone and afraid. Clara's voice grew stronger as the plan crystallized. Give me access to your files, your accounts, everything Evelyn thinks I'm already spying on. Let me help you build the case to destroy her instead of the other way around. Clara, that's insane, is it? She's been playing chess while we've been playing checkers. Time to change the game. Clara reached for him, her fingers tangling with his. No corporate law, Julian. I may work in a cafe, but I have a business degree and 3 years of paralegal experience I never got to use. Let me help you fight back. Julian stared at their joined hands. If we do this, there's no going back. If it fails, we go down together. And if it succeeds, then we might actually have a chance at something real. Julian's thumb traced across her knuckles. But I need to know you're choosing this. Not the money, not the children's charity. Me. The man who manipulated and used you, who's about to lose everything because he was too proud to see the trap closing around him. Clara stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes. I'm choosing you. The man who held me when I was broken, who remembered my coffee order, who's so terrified of being abandoned again that he pushes away everyone, who might actually stay. Julian's free hand came up to cup her face, his touch gentle as prayer. This could destroy us both, and let's make sure we take Evelyn Morrison down with us. His kiss was fierce with desperation and hope, nothing like the careful performance they'd perfected for the cameras. This was real, electric. The collision of two people who'd spent their lives in emotional exile finally finding home in each other. When they broke apart, Julian rested his forehead against hers, his breathing ragged. 10 days, he murmured. Days to save your company and expose the truth. 10 days to fall completely, irreversibly in love with you. Clara smiled, the expression fierce as flame. Too late for that? I'm already there. Outside the windows, London glittered like a battlefield, and Clara felt the first spark of hope she'd known in weeks. Evelyn Morrison thought she'd won by turning Clara and Julian against each other. She had no idea what they could accomplish as allies. The wedding was perfect in its calculated imperfection. Clara stood in the courthouse waiting area, smoothing the cream silk dress Julian had chosen for her. No cathedral, no designer gown, no army of photographers. A simple civil ceremony. With 2 witnesses and a judge who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, the press had been told the intimate ceremony was proof of their authentic love. Too precious to be turned into a media circus. The truth was more complex. Every detail had been strategically designed to buy them time while they executed the plan they'd spent 10 sleepless days perfecting. Ready? Julian appeared at her elbow, devastating in a charcoal gray suit that made his eyes look like storm clouds. The past week had stripped away his usual polished composure, replacing it with something raw and infinitely more dangerous. Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. It barely slept, barely eaten, existing on coffee and desperate determination. As they built their case against Evelyn Morrison, late nights hunched over laptops, cross-referencing financial records and legal documents, finding the threads that would unravel 20 years of carefully concealed corporate fraud. But it was the quiet moments that had undone Clara completely. Julian bringing her tea at 3 in the morning, his fingers lingering against hers. The way he'd held her when exhaustion finally claimed her, his heartbeat steady against her cheek. Yesterday, when she'd cracked a joke about their situation, and he'd laughed shed, felt something fundamental shift between them. This wasn't just strategy anymore. It was survival. Theirs together. Julian Ashford. The clerk's voice cut through her reverie. You're up. The ceremony lasted 8 minutes. 8 minutes to bind their lives together. legally, while the real bonds had been forging themselves for days in the crucible of shared purpose. When Julian kissed her their first kiss, his husband and wife Clara tasted desperation and hope in equal measure. Phase 1 complete, he murmured against her lips. Clara smiled, the expression sharp as a blade. Time for Phase 2. They emerged from the courthouse to find exactly what they'd expected. A wall of photographers and reporters shouting questions about the secret wedding and corporate espionage scandal. Clara slipped her hand into Julian's, presenting a united front as they pushed through the chaos to their waiting car. "Mrs. Ashford," a reporter called out, "is it true you've been working with the Morrison family to sabotage your husband's company?" Clara turned, meeting the camera's hungry eye with practiced composure. "I have no comment on Mrs. Morrison's allegations.
However,
My husband and I will be making a joint statement later today that I believe will clarify the situation considerably." Car door closed on the media frenzy, leaving them in sudden, blessed silence. "You're getting good at this," Julian observed, his thumb stroking across her wedding ring, a simple platinum band that somehow felt heavier than the crown jewels. "I had a good teacher." Clara squeezed his hand. "Are you ready?" Julian's smile was, "Winter cold and beautiful? I've been ready for 20 years." The Evergreen Biotech headquarters buzzed with nervous energy as Clara and Julian made their way to the executive boardroom. Word had spread that today's emergency meeting would determine the company's fate and by extension. Julian's future as CEO, the board members were already seated when they arrived, their expressions ranging from hostile to merely suspicious. Evelyn Morrison sat at the far end of the table like a spider in silk, her smile predatory as she watched Clara enter. "How lovely," Evelyn purred, the happy couple. "I wasn't aware Mrs. Ashford would be joining us. My wife has something the board needs to hear." Julian's voice carried absolute authority as he pulled out Clara's chair. Carefully, Clara opened the leather portfolio she'd carried in, withdrawing a stack of documents thick enough to choke on. Now, the past 10 days of investigation had yielded more evidence than they'd dared hope for. "Mrs. Morrison," Clara began, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system 23 years ago. "You and your husband orchestrated the financial ruin of Julian's father through a series of fraudulent investments and manufactured scandals. When he discovered your scheme and threatened to expose it, you drove him to suicide to protect your secret." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Yvalin's smile never wavered, but Clara caught the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "That's a serious accusation, dear. I hope you have proof." Clara slid a document across the polished table. "Your husband's private emails to his financial advisor, discussing the Ashford problem and how best to neutralize the threat. Julian's father wasn't involved in any insider trading scandal. He was murdered to protect your family's reputation." Murmurs rippled around the table. Board members leaned forward, examining the evidence with growing alarm. "Furthermore," Clara continued, gaining momentum, "the recent scandal involving Evergreen's tissue regeneration drug was entirely fabricated. Mrs. Morrison paid a laboratory technician to falsify test results and leak them to the press, hoping to crash our stock price so Morrison Industries could acquire our research division at a fraction of its value." "This is preposterous," Evelyn began. "Bank records," Claire interrupted, sliding another document across the table. £50,000 transferred from your personal account to David Fletcher, the lab tech who provided the false documents. He's already confessed to the FBI in exchange for immunity." Julian leaned back in his chair, watching Evelyn's composure crack with something that might have been satisfaction. Clara had never seen him look more dangerous or more beautiful. "But here's my favorite part," Clara said, her voice taking on an edge that would have made Julian proud. "Your plan to use me as a spy backfired spectacularly. See, I did gain access to my husband's private files, all of them, including the ones detailing every instance of Morrison Industries' corporate espionage over the past 2 decades. Clara withdrew a final folder, this one thick enough to represent 20 years of carefully compiled evidence: patent theft, industrial, sabotage, bribery of federal regulators, murder. Each word fell like a stone into still water. "Julian's been building a case against your family since he was 18 years old. I just helped him organize it properly." The silence in the boardroom was deafening. Evelyn Morrison, the woman who'd returned Clara to the orphanage like a defective toy, who'd manipulated her fears and insecurities to serve her own agenda, finally looked exactly what she was, a cornered predator with nowhere left to run. "You have no idea what you've done," Evelyn hissed, her mask finally slipping completely. "That little cafe girl thinks she can destroy me. I'll bury you both." "Actually," Julian spoke for the first time since Clara had begun her presentation, "you're already buried." FBI raided Morrison Industries an hour ago. They found everything the server with your deleted emails. The offshore accounts, even the original documents proving my father's innocence. Evelyn went white as bone. "Oh, and Evelyn." Julian's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "That abandoned little orphan girl you tried to use as a weapon, she's worth 10 of you, and she's my wife. Touch her again, and I'll destroy what's left of your pathetic life with my bare hands." Security appeared as if summoned by magic, their presence making it clear that Evelyn's time at Evergreen Biotech and her freedom was over. As they escorted her from the boardroom, she turned back one final time. "This won't hold up in court." "Ain't. Have no real proof, Mrs. Morrison." Clara's voice stopped her cold. "I recorded every conversation we had, including your detailed confession about manipulating Julian's father and orchestrating this entire scandal. The FBI has been very interested in those recordings." Evelyn Morrison left in handcuffs, her 20-year reign of corporate terror finally at an end. The boardroom erupted in relieved conversation as the implications sank in. Evergreen Biotech was not only cleared of all charges, but positioned to sue Morrison Industries for billions in damages. Julian's reputation was restored, his position as CEO secured, but Clara only had eyes for her husband, who was watching her with an expression of such profound admiration that it made her chest tight with emotion. "We did it," she whispered. "You did it?" Julian stood, crossing to her side and cupping her face in his hands. "You brilliant, magnificent, terrifying woman. You saved everything. We saved each other." Julian's kiss tasted like victory and promises, like the future they'd fought so hard to claim. Around them, the board members applauded, but Clara was lost in the gray depths of her husband's eyes. "So what happens now?" she asked when they finally broke apart. "Now we go home." Julian's smile was soft with something that looked suspiciously like forever. "We fund your orphanage, we rebuild the company together, and we figure out how to be married to our best friend. Just like that? Just like that." Julian tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch infinitely gentle. "Unless you have objections to being married to a man who's completely, irrevocably in love with you?" Clara's answering smile could have lit up London. "None at all, Mr. Ashford, none at all." 6 months later, Clara stood in the garden of the Brennan Children's Home meant for the little girl who'd once been told she was nobody, special watching 50 formerly homeless children play in the sunshine. Julian found her there as the sun set, wrapping his arms around her from behind and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. Clara leaned back against his chest, solid and warm and impossibly dear. Around them, the sound of children's laughter filled the air like music, proof that sometimes broken people could create something beautiful together. "Only one," she said, turning in his arms to face the man who'd started as her convenient husband and become her inconvenient soulmate. "I wish I'd dropped that spoon on purpose the night we met." Julian's laughter echoed across the garden, rich and unguarded, the sound of ice finally melting into something that looked remarkably like spring. "Next time," he said, kissing her forehead with the reverence of a man who'd learned the difference between using someone and loving them, "I'll catch it for you." Clara smiled, watching the children she'd fought to save play in the home she'd built with the man she'd never expected to keep. Sometimes, the most beautiful endings came from the most broken beginnings. Subscribe for more emotionally gripping romance stories. Like if you love complex characters finding love against all odds, comment your favorite moment from the story. Turn on notifications so you never miss our latest uploads. K end.